You always have the most coordinated masks. It's very impressive. That's so funny. That's a good idea. Okay.
All right. Call to order the October 6th, 2021 meeting of the Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority. Cindy, please call the roll.
Carson,
Here.
Rachel,
Here.
Skippy,
Present.
Allison,
I don't think she can hear us.
Allison,
There we go. Allison.
can you hear us?
Sorry, I didn't unmute the phone. They
Okay.
couldn't hear us.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't hear anything, and there's no way to chat and let you know that, so I'm trying to be patient.
I think we got it
You
now.
can't read my lips.
Okay, and then Kelly,
Yes, I'm here on Zoom.
great.
Sorry I couldn't be
Francie,
there in the room.
I'm here on Zoom as well, thank you.
and then the only one I think missing right now is John. Thank you.
Great, so we've got public comment. Looks like, Elizabeth, do you have some comments?
Oh, I didn't either.
I'm Elizabeth Milius. As you all know, housing is my favorite topic, and I'm really here first and
Oh,
foremost.
is the mic on?
Oh,
I'm sorry. Wait a second, so we get you on GrassRoots. Thank you.
First and foremost, to thank you all for taking up this issue of seller standards and inspections prior to listing for sale. I wrote about this several times last winter, and it's quite remarkable, frankly, to see something move this quickly, this far forward, and that's you guys. Thank you. It's a really vital first step. Another comment along those same lines, just as I was reading through the packet, is to remember that just like in the free market and just like when you buy a used car, the seller, as desperate as they are for housing, the buyer, as desperate as they are for housing, does not have to complete the sale. And this concept of, wow, it's a really, really old unit and there was really bad deferred maintenance from way, way, way back. Well, as shameful as that is that we've allowed these properties to fall into such disrepair, it still is up to the buyer to say yes. And so this concept of, well, maybe we'll do some extra things for people when the units are really, really bad. Frankly, I think it's a lot better if we just, like a used car, look at it as good is good, medium is medium, and when it's bad, but not degrees of bad. I think the subjectivity is going to be a can of worms. So I just raised that little issue. And then a question for you, actually. Where do I get the best information on housing mitigation?
That would be through the city and the county land use codes.
Land use
through
code?
Devs.
Okay, community comm dev departments in
Yes.
both. Okay, great,
Planner of the day. It's easiest thing.
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have anyone online with a comment?
Hi, John.
Sorry, I'm late.
You're not
We
bad at all.
got some.
You can blame it on the entrance.
Is there anyone online that would like to make a comment? If so, turn your video on and unmute yourself, please. Going once, all right, going twice. Okay, we will move on to the executive director's comments. Diane.
And thanks to Maddie for running my slides for me. My computer is not doing its best right now, and if you order a new computer, it's going to take at least 4 months, we've recently learned, with shipping and chip availability. So with that, thank you. You want to go to the next slide?
Oh, wow. That might be it.
First and foremost, on the affidavits, we're at 92%, and Andrew, Bethany, and Cindy are working through, which properties they are, et cetera. There have been, Maddie went door to door, and posted things on people's doors, including a paper copy of the affidavit. We will take it in any way, shape, or form people want to give it to us. Maddie and Bethany continue to get calls from people saying, hey, I just got this, or I didn't see this. We know we've got a problem with stuff going to spam. We had a conversation yesterday at the staff meeting about, can we start texting people to alert them that something went to their email, for example. So we're working on a lot there. Probably another big piece is that in the next few weeks, not this week because we are still getting those kind of pieces coming in, there'll be a letter going out to those who have not filled out their affidavit, letting them know we will be issuing notices of violation. It's a $150 fine if you don't turn it in, and it is a deed restriction violation. So, some may think that's a small number, but that's a decent fine. And I still think even if we fine someone, they still have to complete the affidavit. So, do know that's something that will be happening in the next few weeks. Thanks.
Great. And
Sorry. Matthew is loading up his U-Haul and will be in town on Monday. He starts work on Wednesday of this week, and I expect you'll be hearing from him. Give him till the end of November. His first priority is going to be meeting staff and just getting feet on the ground, filling out HR paperwork, etc. He's excited. Cindy talked to him last week, and we're looking forward to that.
Very nice.
Very exciting.
And handing it over to Cindy.
So, just a reminder that right now, we will on Friday afternoon send out a news flashes. We will have a couple of rentals available that people can start signing up late Friday afternoon. I suggest that if you're interested in items like that you get on our website, which is www.apcha.org. And you sign up, you hit the notify me button and you sign up for that. We are gonna have a 2-bedroom category 2 unit available at Truscott Phase 1 and a 2-bedroom loft available at Truscott Phase 2. So look for those. Our sales that are coming out on late Friday afternoon, we are adding 2 to the mix. One is a Benedict Commons. It's a category 3. And Benedict Commons is 715 East Hyman Avenue, and it's number 11. And we're not having any open houses, but we will be putting pictures on that. Just a reminder that with a new regulation change, it's a category 3, so only category 2 and category 3 households can bid on that. We are also listing 53 Forge Road, the single-family home out at Burlingame. If you have any questions, it'll be, we're not gonna have an open house on that. And again, that is RO, so again, with our new policy, only category 5, and RO households will be able to bid on that. So we'll have pictures on our website as well. This is one property that we will show by appointment, and there's my contact information will be in the ad. So that's what we have coming up.
Hey Cindy, how are you, with 53 Ford Road, we know there's things that need to be done to make it I'd call it more livable, single family
Right,
home,
when people set up a time to meet with me and go out and look at it, I will tell them what the process is gonna be.
How are you, I'm just thinking about the listing. So when we list it to the public on the website, don't we want to,
It's actually in the ad.
microphone?
Oops.
Don't we want to, don't we
The
want to have it in the
there's
ad?
information about that, it does need work, and that is in the ad.
Okay.
Yeah, red light is on, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
I just turned myself off, folks.
Yeah,
That
just
was
pull it a
probably
little
better for
closer.
everything,
Just
and
pull
I'm
it a
sorry
little
about
closer.
that.
Are both the 2 bedrooms just hot category 2 rentals?
No, rentals.
I'm not sure.
For
The second one, the Truscott, the 2-bedroom loft, which is available the end of November, is a tax credit. It's Truscott Phase 2, so it's a tax credit property.
Got it.
So, those maximum household incomes and all that will be in the ad
Got it.
of what they are.
Cool. Thank you.
One thing to remember about rentals, they get published on Friday, and every Friday I go in and I click through all the properties, just because then I get to learn the properties, etc. they're generally gone by Wednesday.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So so there'll be times when you go in and say, oh, wow, there's nothing here.
Well,
Right.
sign up ends Wednesday at 3 o'clock. So on Wednesday at 3 o'clock, if you haven't signed up by that point in time, that's when you can't sign up anymore after that. And I think does it stay off? Does it go off of
Yes, so it goes off the website at 3, and then Nicole and I do our
start to go
stuff.
through it?
Yeah.
What's
So
the
for the
average
properties
number
that
of
we manage,
applicants?
it's the longest work history that we look at first.
What's the average number of applicants? Lottery, is it a lottery, or you just go by work history?
No, it's the longest work history that we do. And with regards to like Trescott Phase 1, because the income levels are higher, it's a lot easier for us to fill those than our tax credit properties. We usually end up going through quite a few people on the Trescott Phase 2 list. I think if I remember correctly, for a 2-person household,
For
it was
tax
like
credit,
around 40.
for tax credit.
Yeah,
It's like 56,000.
yeah. So, and that's for a 2-person household, whether you're 2 adults or you're a single parent. So it's a little bit harder to fill our 2 bedrooms in our tax credit properties.
Just, thanks for that. I think it's great that we use this televised and public forum at our 2-week meeting to talk about what's available and what's in lottery. I mean, it's just a little more public awareness of the units as they come up. So I really appreciate that. I think it's a good part of our meeting. The one question I have is, again, for newer arrivals to our community who are not all familiar with APCHA, do we do any sort of newspaper ad to tell people where the website is and how to find it, and/or in Spanish of where the website is?
The rental ads are also in Spanish.
Okay, but do we have anything in the paper to tell people how to find the website?
No, we used to, when we first stopped advertising.
The big long
For
ads.
weeks, we put an ad in the paper saying, by the way, we're no longer advertising in the paper,
Yeah.
please look on our website. So when we first went over to just doing it on our website, we did do advertising that way. But it's been years since we've just done it on our website.
Yeah, no, I realize that, and it's just, again, I kind of think about our incoming freshman class and people who might be new to the community. I mean, I literally was just talking to a woman today who was waiting on me, and she's like, oh, there's an affordable housing program, and I'm not saying we should expend a huge amount of money, but it just seems like periodically, or even if we can get them to do it as a public service
I
announcement.
think Cindy needs to get a Facebook page and throw it on Facebook.
Yeah, that might be where more people read anymore, but between online and the copy, it just seems that something occasionally should remind people how to find our website and that these are the services we offer.
I mean, I joke about that, but I think social media is,
No, we do, we are,
probably a better medium
Bennett Bramson, and someone else started a new rentals and roommate, and it's not real estate agents, and we're on there. The rental and buyer guides are on there. The biggest challenge to kind of doing a newspaper advertisement every now and then is anybody who's new to town is not gonna end up in a unit. Right, because of the work history and or the purchase, 4-year purchases, 4-year work requirement for purchase. So I'm not saying it's wrong, it's
Right.
just how do we, most effectively use.
And I can understand that. I just raise it in terms of public awareness of the organization. And when we do get to the Burlingame Phase 3 sales, there's probably going to be a certain amount of movement more than usual within our rental properties and things like that. So I just want to keep it out there, and as I always say, don't keep your light under a bushel, and try to let people know we're here. Thank you.
No, and in fact, that may be worth, like kind of bang for your buck, being in the small print copy, little piece that's just in text. Did you know about APCHA? Because sometimes that's more visible than the giant columns on the side.
The small ads under the cartoons get a lot of notice, very small little spaces. Thank you.
what's the only part of the paper I read?
That's what I'm saying, those are good cheap
It
ads to
sounds
get.
like, I mean, if Cindy's got, if we're listing properties on Monday and they're gone on Wednesday.
Yeah.
For rental.
For rentals.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar. I'll take a motion to approve either together or by individual motion.
I would move to approve the consent calendar.
Got a motion from Rachel,
I'll second.
second from John.
Roll call?
Roll call, please.
Okay. Allison?
She's got a
Sorry, is
question.
there a time for discussion on these at
Yeah,
all?
you should do discussion.
Did you? Yes.
Just for resolution number 7, I was curious, is that something that we know? Do you want to spend that 15 grand that's already been, like we've already assessed that, we know people are moving out, or that's an amount that we are willing to spend and it's a as-needed basis?
So I think we're just voting on the minutes right now, right?
No,
Oh,
we-
no, it's all as one.
Want to vote
Yeah.
on all of it, my bad.
These are rental units, not ownership units.
Right.
Right.
Correct?
This is the rental
Yes, I
property that's
understand
owned by the actual Aspen County Housing Authority. So, and
I
these are
understand
units
that.
that have been in our inventory since like the late 60s or 70s. So, and it's a building that when people have lived in them 20, 25 years, and it's when we do finally get a turnover, it does take this amount of money to bring it up to today's standards.
I understand that. I was just asking if we know, that there'll be 3 turnovers at about 5 grand, like, or we're just setting that aside, and if it happens, we'll spend it.
This is for one turnover right now. That's all it is.
Oh, wow, okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, let's roll call vote.
Okay. Allison?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Carson?
Yes.
John?
Yep.
And Rachel?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda are regulation updates. So this is dependent age and what age counts towards qualifying for a bedroom. So looks like Bethany and Cindy?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I apologize. There's one error in the first paragraph of the memo. It's a holdover from a previous discussion, so I do apologize for that. But the rest of the document is good to go. So this is a conversation that we all started earlier this summer. It kind of got put on the back burner, and so we're bringing it back for further discussion. So what APCHA staff is recommending is the possibility that the dependent age be changed from 24 to 19 to qualify for a bedroom at move-in. So this is just a qualification at move-in. Obviously, this is not, I shouldn't say obviously, this does not affect if someone goes away to college or once ownership is acquired, if there is a change in household makeup. We're not saying that the house must be sold. This is just at point of qualification. And so currently, under APCHA regulations, a dependent between age 19 and 24 is allowed to be counted towards a bedroom. So hypothetically, two individuals with one child that's 22, they would be eligible for, let's say, a 3-bedroom. Thank you, Maddie, for sharing. And the idea that is at age 19, most individuals, if not, have graduated high school and are away. A parent can still include said child if they're an employee in Pitkin County, and that dependent can count towards a bedroom. So this is really targeting that 19 to 24 that is likely away at school or a different job or not living at home. We have seen a number of units where they have qualified for a 3-4 bedroom with students in college. Cindy and I have received a fair bit of anonymous public feedback comments through our website, saying that it's not fair that families have younger children and they're losing out to a 3-bedroom to a family that's children are away at school for the majority of the year. I understand that this is a tough subject, but I think it's important that we tackle this before Burlingame Phase 3 comes online, because as Rachel brought up earlier, that is a large number of units. And we just want to make sure that what is in the regulations the board is happy with, and we can appropriately apply that to Burlingame Phase 3. I'm happy to answer any questions. Cindy, if you have any other things you want to add before the board asks questions. And I know Kelly raised her hand, so I can go to her first. But Cindy, did I cover everything?
Yes, I believe you did.
Okay.
Don't you want your strike through 24, not 19?
Seems backwards.
Seems backwards.
Yep, the strike through got switched. That's really funny, John. I profusely apologize for this. This was an error. So with that, the strike should be 24, and 19 should be the winner of what is the proposed movement. But again, that's up for discussion.
Okay. So questions for staff. Kelly.
You clarified my first question about strike through, and then my second question, I just want to really understand. So if a family has a 20-year-old who is living and working full-time in Pitkin County, that 20-year-old would be able to qualify as part of the household by documenting their full-time work?
Correct.
Okay. And otherwise, if they are not working in Pitkin County, under this rule, they would not be counted as a qualifying household member for unit size.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. That was my only question. And well, no, I guess I have another one. Is there any provision for, say, you have a family of 4 that's been in a 1-bedroom? Is there any provision for them to qualify for, say, like a 3-bedroom? So not a full size, household for that family, but maybe a full size less 1.
Right now, there's no provision that would give that household any sort of priority to move into a larger unit. This would apply for in-complex bids as well as the normal qualifications. So this has the potential of helping that, in that sometimes we do see in complex bids where folks' kids are away at school, but they're still trying to get that larger unit in the complex, and they're bidding against other families in complex that might have younger children.
Sure. Okay. So like in my example, say you have a family of 4, 2 qualify, they live in a 1-bedroom, they could qualify for a 2-bedroom, and that would be their max size. Okay, thanks.
John and Skippy.
So I like the change, but I also, so we're basically taking away, the 19 or the 20-year-olds housing option, right? Or availability. How long do we envision any kind of burn off of that? So let's say, my kid comes back, flunks out of college, which is quite possible, and then comes back and moves in with us and gets a job at the Hotel Jerome again, like he is as a bellman, making decent money, but probably not enough to live by himself.
Are you still claiming him on your income tax return?
Today I am. But
I was going to say, if you were not, then he's not classified as a dependent. He's an adult.
But he's a dependent today. But when he comes when he fails out of college and comes back to Aspen, moves back in with mom and dad, and mom and dad decide to move out of where we live and move into something else, and he's going to occupy one of those bedrooms for a year or two, right? And gets on his feet, makes a little more money, maybe gets a job in construction, making more money, and then he wants to go qualify for an APCHA unit, say 2-3 years from now. Is there a burn off of that credit, or are we just, that's it?
What do you mean a burn off of the?
Well,
He could still go.
His
still
bedroom, right? So we're saying mom and dad plus one, or mom and dad plus whatever, and then the plus one is the 19, 20-year-old that's living at home today, but 3 years from now, that plus one that made them qualify for that extra bedroom unit, whatever it was,
He can bid on his
he
own,
wants to move out.
and he can
right?
bid on his own.
He could bid on a
But we
one
didn't
bedroom.
burn the
Yeah.
plus one, is what you're saying. So he could live for 3 months, or he could live for 3 years, for all that
He
matter.
could live for 15 years in your place and then decide to start bidding on his own.
But I mean, that's what I'm saying. So we're putting some teeth here, so people. But
So, I think I'm hearing you, but if they in their current residence would not have to move or anything like that. This is about new sales and new rentals.
oh, that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
So,
but
you
if
wanna-
he comes back, he could bid on his own unit.
No, but what I'm saying is I want to go bid on a new unit. I'm in a 2-bedroom place. I want to move to a 3-bedroom place, something. And I've got a 20-year-old kid that comes back and gets a full-time job in Aspen.
Yeah.
So then,
You wouldn't be able to count him.
but we said if they were working full-time in Aspen, they'd be able to count.
Again,
If he's dependent.
If he's,
if he's a
If only he's a
dependent, but still we're looking at age. Bethany I would refer to Bethany on this, but to me, in that situation like that, you would not be able to, even if he was working full-time here and you still declared him on your income tax return, if he's 23, 24, he, to me, is over 19, and you wouldn't be able to use
So
him
the-
for a bedroom. But I would defer to
the key
Bethany
word
on
is
that.
dependent.
Right.
Okay.
Even if he were dependent,
I
'cause
think,
he's over that age.
you know, sorry, Cindy, when I had made that comment, John, my perspective is, and I should have clarified this, that 22-year-olds would actually be added as an owner possibly and be included in that household from that perspective. So they would be attaching, you know, if they are the employee in Pitkin County, they'd be attaching themselves to that property as well.
Okay.
Just to follow up on this, because unrelated people can bid on a studio, a 1-bedroom, and a 2-bedroom. Unrelated people cannot bid on a 3-bedroom.
Yes,
Those
they
are
can.
family-oriented units.
They
but-
can, though.
You can. Okay, I was under the impression that unrelated, non-family units could not bid on 3-bedrooms because we were trying to have the 3 bedrooms for families and people with dependents.
Well, it has to be a dependent, but you could have a single mom
Okay,
and have a boyfriend.
okay,
And the 3 of them are bidding on a 3-bedroom. And the single mom works full-time Pitkin County,
Okay.
and the boyfriend works full-time in Pitkin
That-
County.
that-
They
that
can
helps
bid on a
clarify that they're
3-bedroom.
not married, but again, what I'm trying to get at is but a married couple, John, his wife, and their son, all related and all family, would not be able to bid on a 3-bedroom because there's no dependents involved.
They can, their second priority. If there's no dependents, if you're a 3-adult household,
Right,
you have a second priority.
okay,
You still are ahead of a 2-person household.
right,
If you're 3 adults. So you still, no matter what, your 3-adult qualified household has a priority over 2 adult in a
Okay.
3-bedroom.
and then at least 1 adult plus dependents has the priority over both of those 2 categories.
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, Skippy, and then I think Kelly has a question.
Yeah, so two questions. I was a little confused. On the first line, it says foster children, a foster adult, yada yada. may never be a dependent regardless of age or disability. But then in the next line, it says qualifying child, and in the parenthetical, it says eligible foster child. So that seemed contradictory, and I didn't understand it.
Sorry, Skippy, I'm just rereading it too so I can give you the right answer.
Talk, microphone, chew, no microphone. Catch it.
Where'd she go?
She's reading it.
Okay, so the qualifying child is an eligible foster child, whereas and an eligible foster child, I don't believe is defined in the regulations, so I think we're going to have to give that a definition. And I could be wrong, Cindy, you can help me with that. But the whole, it's not a discrepancy, and Tom helped us write this provision, so if Tom's on the line and wants to jump in, that would be great, because it's currently in our regulations. But the point of it is that we are really trying to tighten down what is a household and what counts as that, just because we've seen a slew of cases over the past few years where folks are saying that someone's not part of their household even though they probably are. And so that's where this paragraph came in, and that's probably not a great explanation, so I apologize.
Yeah, I guess it's just not clear to me. Are we trying to exclude foster children or include them? Because as I read this, it says both.
It does say both. I think we're gonna have to. I think we have to clarify that. The issue with a foster child is that there may be months and months and months where you don't have one. So for us to give, because we had somebody who actually asked, well, I want to be a foster parent. I want a 3-bedroom. They don't have a child now. They're a single person. So we said, right, you at this point in time, you don't qualify. So, and I would agree, I think these contradict themselves, so I think we're gonna have to really look at this language and figure out which way we really and truly wanna go on that.
Right, so I mean, I think that's a good discussion for the board as to what our intent there is.
I would also, on that one, Cindy, suggest talking through the county with the Human Services. They are often struggling to find foster parents when a child needs an out-of-the-home placement for the safety of the child. Now, I'm not saying we need to bend our rules or not bend our rules, but we should coordinate that conversation a little bit with our county members to see if there are challenges there, or maybe there's a way they can set aside that there's one unit for that and they work for that, or they have their own unit or something. But I'm just saying, I know it's a need throughout the community for the protection of children to have foster family homes. That's me, sorry about that.
That's okay. All right.
Because usually a foster child is not classified as a dependent on your income tax return.
Right.
And that's what we look at.
I mean, I think it should be tied to, claiming someone as a dependent. But you had more questions?
Yeah, that's just my question. I don't know enough about it. I read it, and it just seemed contradictory. And I thought, on one hand, we certainly want to be a passionate community that provides for our most vulnerable, who's more vulnerable than a child without parents. And then good to hear Cindy say that there's no requirement. It's almost like an ADU where you build this thing, but you may never use it, and it's a scarce community resource. So I just don't really know enough to balance those competing needs.
We get an opportunity to game the system is what I'm thinking.
It sounds like both. Okay, so that was one. And then the second question I had, Bethany, so this is for someone, it's 19 or a full-time student, right? So if you move out of the house, but you're a student and you're 22, 25, 30 in medical school, do you still qualify?
This is saying you don't qualify even if you're in school.
I thought it said or a full-time student.
No.
No, okay.
You're over
A member
24,
of the
that's
household
it.
or. Yeah.
So I'm not
Sitting
there.
here 'cause my question is related to that.
Kelly, you wanna go ahead with your
Okay.
question?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about like how would somebody who is 20 years old, a dependent, and going to school at CMC part time be treated in these roles?
So, currently, they're allowed to qualify for a better moving forward. They wouldn't qualify. However, we do look at their college transcripts, and we do look at if they're in school full time and where they are at when they come in to qualify. So this would be that change where all of a sudden that CMC student wouldn't qualify anymore.
Got it. A student doesn't qualify anymore. Okay. Thank you.
Kelly, did you have another question? No. Okay, Allison?
Yeah, I have the same confusion over foster child, and I think come down on the same side as a lot of the discussion that the point of the program is to have those beds full, and so without a guarantee, if it was an adopted child, that's different, but that doesn't feel like that's part of the qualifying child that we're going for. I think in the scenario that I think it was John, I actually can't see very well who's talking when, but both John and Kelly are talking about, this would be a family who's bidding on a bigger place that maybe their kid would want to come home and live with for, like you said, a year or two, but at some point they're moving out, so and especially with ownership, once you're in. I think that also goes against the heart of the program where we're trying to get people in rooms, knowing that for the next 35 years, it would be empty, right? Instead of new families coming in or 3 people. So I don't feel all that bad for either one of those scenarios. I support the change. And then just to clarify, we're only discussing this red line right now, or under point 1, it reads APCHA staff as recommending blah, blah, blah. So I didn't know if that's something that's decided or if that's something we are recommending and we're discussing today as well.
So that has already been approved, and the interesting thing is it's not in one of the memos, and so I deposited the wrong memo in for Cindy to combine the packet and didn't catch it. So that has already gone through approval, and so I apologize because this was originally, we started talking about it at the same time as disability and retirement, and they got separated that. So completely my fault. I apologize. I did not catch it, but that has already been discussed.
I will withhold my fascinating thoughts on that one then for today.
Carson, the only thing that concerns me a little is I know this was a topic that our fellow board member David Logren was really somewhat animated about and had some different points on, so I feel bad that he's not here for this discussion. I think you're going to find some quote hardship or ones that are a little tough feeling. But on the other hand, I think Allison has made the correct point, we've all acknowledged, is that people are very likely to eventually fly that nest early on and result in an empty bedroom.
Right.
The one thing I'm not sure that we have fully covered in here, and we may want to have the detail, is if it is a handicapped or disabled child in some form. And I think that would be very different if a child is really going to remain a dependent and
That needed long-term support.
yeah, and the longer term support. I don't know if there's a way to acknowledge that, or you'd hate to have a situation where they made their own money for a year before they had the mental health break or something like that, and so now they're no longer called a dependent, but they're essentially moving back into a dependent role. So I don't know if we need a mention of that, or if that's just something that's understood and handled administratively during an application process.
So I think, Rachel, we can go back to the drawing board, come up with some different things, work with Tom, figure out what the best verbiage might be. I mean, this isn't a first reading at all, so this
Yeah.
is just the start of the discussion. So we can certainly brainstorm some ideas around that, around the CMC topic that I think Kelly brought up earlier. You know, if a student is enrolled locally, I hate to add one into the mix, but if someone's attending college virtually, if there's a way, and those sorts of questions, we can start brainstorming that and bring it back.
Okay.
I wonder even if the qualifying relative, if you add that, you know, a child in that list, for Rachel's scenario, if that would be one solution there. Sorry, I had one other point. I think, you know, none of these people, again, we're not kicking anyone out. I also agree with Rachel that some circumstance is going to come up. And I think in a lot of our program, we have ways to petition staff and plead your case, and I wonder if that could be worked into this. But again, even, you know, the student, they lived somewhere when they left for school or when they started school virtually. And so, again, this is just families who want to expand, knowing at some point the family size is contracting. It's a very specific you know, scenario, and it's not like someone who was going to CMC after graduating loses their bedroom. Their bedroom's the same as it was when they were in high school. So I think it's a little less dramatic than it sounds, and just trying to avoid that kind of guarantee of an empty bedroom for so many decades.
I agree.
Well said.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, this is, I mean, looking at the survey results here. I mean, 19% of our 5 bedrooms have at least 5 people living in them. 39% of our 4 bedrooms have at least 4 people, and 65% of our 3 bedrooms have at least 3 people. So, I mean, I support this. I mean, I think this is something we got to maximize. We got to maximize this resource.
I agree.
Okay.
Do you need more direction on this for tonight?
I don't think so. Do you, Bethany?
I don't think so. No, I think I'm good. I have a nice little list of notes, and Cindy and Tom and I can get to work trying to redraft this, and if we, you know, we can either, we'll figure out next steps. So.
Well, this will come back for
I
first
really
reading? Or?
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Just to play off Carson, that I really appreciate that we have the home check data, and for charts like that to be in a memo like this is really helpful. Thanks for including that.
Agreed.
To answer Skippy's question, I think, Bethany, the intent is to bring this back before we take it to a first reading.
Yes.
And just
I think that's the plan.
Great. And just a agenda comment, we're very much working on looking at bringing a regulation change and then bringing a major policy item, or multiple major policy items if we have them, but trying to make that balance, because we know that sometimes spending 3 hours on one topic can be a little bit, much. We're about to do that, so we're all good.
Right. Yep. Okay. And with that, we will move into seller standards and capital repairs.
Bethany, you can go have a happy birthday with your husband.
Is it Bethany's birthday today too?
No, it's her husband's.
Birthday. Oh,
Okay.
which, by the way,
Thank you.
by the way, do we want to take a brief intermission and sing?
You don't want me to.
No, we
Rachel?
can do that
Cindy's
later.
gonna sing for Rachel.
We have a
Let's
cake.
do it after we get the meat of the work.
Fabulously cute cake here.
Operatically?
So we will look to go to about 6:15, and I will set myself a little timer, so just to kind of keep us on track. And I'll ask the chair to do that as well. So with that, Maddie's gonna run slides for me, and thank you Maddie for doing that. If the board's okay, we're not gonna put up the packet because we're really talking about 3 policy questions today and not so much what's in the packet. And I do on the slides have the relevant items from the packet, such as the table. So we started this on April 7th. And, I would say we've made, to echo Elizabeth, we've made some good progress on it. Gotten through some hard issues, and, tonight is, we're gonna do two things. One is, I did go to, as it mentions in the memo, Tom Smith provided some feedback at one point, on kind of doing some more deep thinking on what are we proposing and where are the really hard parts of this? And then a series of discussions with Cindy and Bethany around, okay, we got this far and did this much thinking. It's the right time to go back in and look at it and say, is this everything we would really recommend? And we came up with one new piece that you've seen in the packet. We'll talk about that first. Then I do very much want to talk about the finances. I think this is probably one of the hardest pieces. And there are lots of other pieces to go through, as you've seen in the packet. Staff, as we've gone through and detailed out what the implementation program would look like. I will tell you, after talking to Francie Jacober's son, Cindy and I met with Forrest, it is going to be a hard road when we get to the point of how are we going to get contractors to do this work. He did share some good ideas with us, and whether it be we end up hiring staff or putting folks on retainer, definitely some good ideas on that front. So we'll start with the hard part. The first piece was that, so here are the policy questions. They're in your packet as well. Maddie, if you'll go to the next slide. This piece was for me, and Maddie, if just for a second you'd hit like Control L, and that should make that full screen. Thank you. Should we approach different property types differently? And I will give all the credit on this goes to Cindy and Bethany, right? This is based on experience. First category, obvious. In particular, right, mobile homes are not designed to last 45 years. And this is no disrespect to people who've kept them up in good shape and done repairs and added, I mean, you've seen them. Mm-hmm. They've done additions, they've added walls, they added a roof, they put it on a foundation. Lots of things have happened. At the end of the day, Cindy and Bethany have actually worked with Clayton Homes, which is, you may know, is Berkshire Hathaway company, and they make a very high quality, and there's one in the area, and it's also they do very energy efficient homes, and they've created a program where you can actually put one of those on your property if you want to. The recommendation here is do the right of first refusal and have APCHA bring it up to standards. I'll just do the high level on these, and then we really want the board, right? These are proposals, they're not like the perfect answer. Rachel and Carson both brought up those homes that are, I think Hunter Creek was the example, that are, they just haven't been updated. They're priced well below the median of that category, and they really need updating. And avocado's coming back, probably not in the form that it is in some units.
What?
The color avocado.
Color avocado.
Refrigerator?
Avocado refrigerator.
He's too young to
exactly.
understand.
Now I know what you mean.
Big Brady
The
Bunch.
one handle fridge, and they got it.
So again, a proposal to how to bring those up to standard, and update those. Homes that the inspector deems to have significant life safety issues. I will say on this front, we've all had a little bit of a discussion around, I think Francie mentioned it at one point, that, and Tom mentioned it as well. An inspector is going to show you everything in that property that may have a problem. We do want an APCHA project manager to be involved in determining which of those things actually need to be updated versus which are acceptable at this point. But those that have significant life safety issues in particular, this is one where I think there's plenty of debate around, do we give someone the opportunity to just say sell it to APCHA and call it a day? Or are we going to have people wait until that property to be able to sell it until they bring it up to standard? And then lastly, going right to lottery on homes that are in good standards. So these were the four, we looked across the board at how could we break these up? We actually at one point had age of property in there, but as you've heard David talk about, lots of folks are very good at keeping their property up to date. In fact, I think when we get a large number of inspections done, I think we'll start to see that they're actually not as bad as those one-offs that are like, wow, that's really bad. However, we have to address that. So with that, I'll hand it back to the board chair, and my recommendation on this is that we kind of go till about 5:20, 5:30 on this as a discussion, and we don't have to finish it. It's more that, the question really is, does the board want to go down this road? And if so, staff we actually have gone a little bit further than this, but I didn't want to throw all the detail at you yet. Just wanted to ask the high-level question. Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got, I mean, there's kind of two questions. Do we want to go down this, and if so, do we want to provide any direction? Is that kind of what you're...
Sure, and probably what I'd say is, and feel free to provide direction within those, right? We'll be taking notes on, so for example, in the third category, if you really say, no, if somebody's property's in bad shape, they're gonna have to take some ownership for it, and, which it could include the time it takes to repair it.
Right.
So feel free to provide that as well. We will come back with more detail on this one.
All right, I think Kelly and John, Rachel. So Kelly, go ahead.
Thanks. I just have a couple questions, not discussion at this point. So is this whole list based on category designated units? You know, so are we excluding ROs altogether? Is my first question.
I don't think we've excluded RO.
Well, most of the ROs don't sell through us. Like Lazy Glen and Aspen Village, those two mobile homes do not sell through us. So we have no say in those at all.
Well, and they would also be ones that are more likely to have that stipulation in the deed restriction. There's nothing in the deed restriction that says that they are required to follow the guidelines as updated from time to time. Right? So when you have those two situations, when they're RO and not required to go through us, and they're not required to follow the updated deed restrictions, Cindy's right, we're at a loss.
So that kind of addressed kind of my first question a little bit, but how much teeth are we gonna be able to have, or APCHA gonna be able to have on, say, a unit that we deem inhabitable, you know, but somebody's, you know, because we've seen it, right? You know, there's a few people where they go to sell it, and you get an inspection, somebody walks through it, they're the first lottery winner, and there's multiple problems with the unit. Happened in Woody Creek, I know for sure, but the seller's like, well, pound sand, I'm gonna go to the next person, and then you go on down that line, and then finally somebody's willing to buy it, right? Because they want it, they need housing so badly, they're willing to accept
A loss.
you know, a significantly in disrepair unit. How much teeth will we have, or will APCHA have, in saying, nope, you can't sell, those are major life safety issues, you're selling to us, I mean, and this is the max you're gonna get out of it.
That is, and we've explored this question, and actually, Rachel had asked a version of that at one point, and we explored it with Tom. If you have, in those deed restrictions that need to follow the APCHA regulations as updated from time to time, you can have as much teeth as you want in that, including reducing the amount of appreciation they get and requiring them to go through a process.
Right.
And that includes an inspection process.
I mean, think about it, the first one up here is a Woody Creek Smuggler trailer park, right, trailers. Trailer is a depreciable asset. You can't finance a trailer. Well, you can finance it if you choose to, but they're not HMDA, you know, it's not considered housing I want to say 1984, might be later than that. So when you think about a depreciable asset that gets worn down, you know, people do take care of it, but eventually they deteriorate to really no value. And then somebody wants to sell their 30 or 40-year-old trailer house that has limited maintenance with, bad roofs and whatever else. And and they want their $250,000 for it, but the lot's worth, what, 50 or some number. What teeth do we have to say, no, that's a scraper, and you'll get 50 grand for your lot, and we're gonna bring a new trailer in?
I see Tom's got his hand up here. Tom, did you have something to add?
Well, yeah, this is the stuff that we talk about over and over and outside of the meetings because it's so this is so difficult. The money part of this is so difficult. And you know, background for me, my assumption is that not assumption, but my educated opinion is that neither the sellers nor the buyers have the money to pay for the repairs in these situations where homes are not just need a new carpet but have real serious life safety issues. Let me first correct one thing that Diane said. We can't change if the deed restriction and the guidelines or now the regulations have to be considered in every case. So because we have variations in deed restrictions over time, none of this is going to be one size fits all. We're making generalizations, and when we come to consensus, when you come to consensus on some generalized policies, then we have to figure out how we make it apply in different scenarios. But Diane brought up regulations that are deed restrictions that incorporate future changes to the regulations. The regulations have minimum standards in them. While on one hand, an owner may want to hold out for a maximum sale price, APCHA has the ability to say, you're not entitled to maximum sale price if you don't meet these minimum standards because these sort of standards are in our regulations. It's also that the case that those minimum standards in maybe not in identical form as in the regulations, but similar. Many of the deed restrictions, Cindy knows better than me, but I would say going back, at least 10 years or so, Cindy, we've been, maybe longer, we've incorporated the minimum standards in the deed restriction.
Right. At least
so if we can enforce the minimum standards on against the seller in either of those scenarios, they don't get maximum sale price, period. Yeah. They get the price that is set after deductions for the repairs necessary to meet those minimum standards.
You know, maybe if we add a fifth category to that grouping, and that be homes with limited deed restriction authority, and segregate them out to think about what are the right solutions for them separately. And assume that most of the homes in the other four categories are ones we're working on where we do have authority. And then try to just segregate the ones that are more challenging and may need different steps.
Yeah, and I think it's important too.
One point I tried to make with Diane and the rest of the staff on this is that the older homes are the ones who are going to need the most work. That's logical. And this is a point that Rachel has brought up before. Those homes with their calculation of appreciation from the original date of purchase to the present, those units are still some of them well below what a new unit in the same configuration, both category and size, would be. And that difference, to me, is something that APCHA can utilize to where a unit doesn't meet minimum standards, negotiate a price with the seller, and buy the unit, fix it, and put it back on the market at the new price for that type of unit. Which basically you're selling a new home.
Well, that pays for those
Why not,
fixes.
You know, it's fair to expect a buyer to pay the current price rather than a lower price because it's an older home that hasn't had the acceleration in resale price to keep up with what it takes now to get a new one.
Yeah, and I think it's important too that, I mean, and what are the teeth? I mean, a lot of the seller standard, minimum sort of guidelines already in the regulations or in the guidelines. It's just adding the piece before they can be sold and allowing people to not circumnavigate it with just going down the list. Allison's had her hand up first.
This is what. Sorry.
Go ahead, Tom.
Just to finish, both you and John have brought this up, but John brought it up tonight. Carson, I know you have in the past because this was your experience. People feel like they have to buy a unit that's not in good shape because the seller will just go to the next person on the list. Well, that's what enforcing the minimum standards can help us to avoid.
Yep.
Well, you're going to need to be prepared.
That's
for
all I
some
wanted
really,
to say.
Be prepared for some really upset sellers when you say nope.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mom and dad are in the room,
This
and
will not be.
Time to pay the piper.
This will not go down easy, but
Yeah.
if they haven't done their, they have to understand. Yeah, if you're an owner of property, you have either an explicit or implied obligation to keep your unit up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Allison, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple, thank you. I would push back just a little on the assumption that the older homes would need the most work. It seems like it probably has more to do with how much turnover there's been. I would think that an owner who's been in their home for a long time, they need that drain to drain or whatever, and they've fixed that. Someone who was there for a year and then sold or came through maybe didn't get around to all the fixes. Though of course just deterioration, I understand where you're coming from that. My first question on this chart would be, in which case would APCHA actually refuse? Like, I do like the idea of APCHA getting to exercise that first right of refusal. I assume that happens the worst state the property is in. What case would APCHA say this is so bad, actually we will just send it back to the public to bid on? Or I don't quite understand why we would refuse.
Sure. I think that is in the third category down. Sorry, they're not numbered. I think that's a question for the board, right? There's on one hand this property is in really bad shape, and there may be a determination. You may want to have a determination in there of, hey, if they lived here for 5 years, and is this a 40-year-old roof issue, kind of thing. And do you want to give someone the opportunity to have APCHA exercise its right of first refusal? Right, we have two kind of goals here. One, I think the primary goal is we want this housing stock to be well taken care of, right? It is a fabulous asset. The other one is that fundamental value of fairness, right? And so trying to develop something that is most fair for the owner.
Okay.
Allison, did that answer your question?
So in what kind of case would APCHA refuse, or do you want to hear that from us when we would recommend that?
Yeah,
happen?
I think that's a question about that third category. If there are significant life safety issues, and it may be something that it's not determined by the inspector, but I think where we got to, we'd probably say that the capital repairs project manager, APCHA's person, deems like this house cannot get sold to somebody with these life safety ishes. Does APCHA want to take?
So in the first two categories, so I'm sorry, I can't see you, so I don't know when you're done talking. Those first two categories, the assumption is that APCHA probably would bring up those properties that have life safety issues. APCHA probably would exercise their first refusal rights and get it and bring it up to standards. We would never say no.
You have correctly interpreted those two recommendations. I think it is right at the end of the day, it is a heavy lift for APCHA and the board and our organization to take ownership and make repairs to units. Yeah. I think we felt that way because we believe it is likely the most efficacious way to make that happen.
Okay, great.
And
The
that's a-
difference between those first two categories, as far as how we approach it, the only difference is that the cost would be added to the sales price, and I don't know why we would only choose that for that second category
We
and
do for the
not
first one, too.
both, and I'm wondering if combining those makes sense, because it's almost exactly the same approach, and why not add the cost in both situations?
You are correct, and Cindy's pointed out that we would add the cost to the sales price in both situations. Because of the model, we've kind of in the back of our collective minds, and I know you've been through a lot of these board meetings, Allison, is that even before you were on the board, is that premise that there's some model in there where we're grabbing some appreciation for improvement. So it's not necessarily just that we're taking any repairs and adding it to the sales price, right? That there's some seller financial contribution to this as well.
Okay, so I know Rachel's got a question.
Yeah, I actually have to go backwards a little bit on a comment here. Because for me, all of this points out, we have to understand what does it really cost to maintain your unit over time. And I know ARP puts out there 2%. You should plan on investing 2% a year into your home for when you eventually sell it. That might be the standard, that might not. But what we have is essentially a product that begins physically deteriorating from day one. At some level, every system is starting to age. And at the same time, at a societal level or price level, there's an appreciation. But we've never really said how much does it cost anyone, to really keep that home in good repair. And I'm perhaps particularly thinking of the lower categories. This is the thought experiment. In Burlingame 2, we sold similar, exact same size units to people in Category 4 and Category 2, income capped. Now, are we expecting the Category 2 people to be able to put in exactly the same dollars as the Category 4 people over time? Is that a realistic expectation? And this comes from me talking with Diane and others, but when we looked at our deed restriction, I thought it's a really perfect opportunity at the very beginning on the appreciation section to explain the intent of your appreciation, to explain you are given this so you can reinvest it in the unit. Or should we just say you're making 5% on your purchase price, period, at the most, or 0.5, 0.5%, and you have this expectation. But I'm just wondering, on some of these units, if you took 2% a year for 40 years, are you really going to be able to rebuild that unit? You know, if you were talking insurance, or perhaps when you're doing a mortgage, I'm not sure, you really think about, well, what is the replacement value of this house? If I'm giving you a loan for $300,000 to buy it, but if it burns down, it's going to cost $500,000 to rebuild it. How are we dealing with that? And I can only think of older cars. You can keep replacing every single system on that car, and it's still going to be an older car. And so, again, I'm just using this more as a precept of what are our expectations of these future buyers and these sellers, you know, of the reality of where they're at and what is the realistic expectation. I'm okay with outlining it very clearly to all the future buyers. And as we keep talking about the first turn of the new people, but I am worried about somebody buying a brand new home and they get inspected 7 years from now and everything's pretty well fine. But that doesn't mean the roof system hasn't started to age by 7 years, or the heat system, or these things. And have they had to put anything into an escrow for their use of systems that won't fail until they're 20 years old? Or is it just that last owner who's going to get stuck with the cost of all the systems that failed after 20 years? Because they passed the first inspection, and they passed the second inspection, but was any money from either of those two first owners' appreciation going into what will be an eventual replacement item, an eventual capital? So this is what I'm really challenged with.
So two things.
Is how do we understand, are we selling people something that's subsidized by $200,000 and then expecting them to keep up the maintenance on the $200,000 that they could not have afforded to buy in the first place. That's kind of what that's where this gap is happening, you know. And the Hunter Creek that went up at the same time for sale as a Burlingame, both category, 2 bedrooms, one a category 4, one a category 2, and you look at those pictures, it was the original finishes that were sold to those people in 1984, and knowing the systems that have failed. But they're only at 155, selling at 155. Are we going to take $80,000 from that person, and it's still not going to be enough to rebuild that unit, and then add on the sales price, and tell them, well, we took it from you, but we're actually going to take the other half from the seller? I mean, the new buyer. I get very confused by that how we could reset a price higher that we didn't allow the original owner to. The original owner would have said, I'd be glad to make these improvements if you'd allowed me to gain $40,000 of appreciation while I own the home. I would have been able to get a second trust at the bank if I had a higher resale value at the time. They would have loaned me the money and I would have done it then. So again, I just want to kind of go step back a little bit to understand the reality of the expectations, especially when we're selling a unit to families at category 2 and 3. Those are very income-pressed families, especially when you have kids. If you're saving for their college, healthcare, you're expecting retirement. I think you talk to Human Services and you find out that an awful lot of our people in the lower categories don't have much left for retirement from trying to keep their units up. So I just want that one thing to really stick. The analogy is, we acknowledge that the capital improvements, capital repairs that someone will make will depreciate. We depreciate them down to 0 after 10 years. But the original structure of the house, we don't account for that depreciation of those amenities that that person owns. We're actually expecting them to repay them and build them back up. I don't know if it's a realistic expectation. Or that we're really factoring everything in.
Yeah, but I think we're getting a little bit off. I mean,
But they're all related.
They are all related, but I think, I mean, those are great points. I feel like we're sort of gonna get paralyzed. I mean, if we've kind of gonna take small bites, and I don't know.
I know, but I can't take a bite of a sandwich. I don't know what's in it. And right now, I don't know what we're asking people in terms of how quickly the physical structures really deteriorate, and how much should we be giving people 4% appreciation and then taking back 3%?
Right.
I mean, that's my real question. Is 2% appreciation on a $60,000 or $120,000 home someone buys? Is that going to be the appreciation that would pay to replace that unit in 50 years? If we were counting on appreciation alone to be the full replacement value of a unit to replace all the systems that fail after 50 years, would 2% appreciation end up being enough? And how we're, as we've all talked about, you can't tap your appreciation until you're after you try to sell. So people could have the appreciation to redo their kitchen or the bathroom or the roof, but they got to go get a second trust somewhere, or they have to do, you know, it's a big challenging step to take on more debt when you don't know whether you're really going to have the rest of your equity left in that pile. You know, I mean, how are banks evaluating loans when the seller says, well, I think I can sell it for 160, but I might only be able to sell it for 110. And so I don't know what my down payment's going to be on the new property I'm trying to buy. We're getting into a lot of stuff, and I don't want to make it more confusing, but it's really hard to say, yeah, I think that we should take 2% appreciation, and that'll pay for things in the future.
But so to me, the 2% number you reference isn't, you know, what is it? $6,000 or something on a $300,000 unit.
Well,
right?
I'm thinking of the more lower end units, John.
Okay. But I'm just saying that to me that isn't going to ever replace the entire unit. That's not going to replace the framing. That's not going to replace a lot of the stuff. The foundation.
We're getting a little bit off topic here. I mean, so a question that we're looking at right now is, after discussing the approach to, so we're looking at approaching these properties differently, which I think we are.
Yeah,
Right.
I generally agree with the approach, but I still think there's some missing data or numbers
Right.
for us to understand, is it a really logical equation, or are we having a faulty logic?
Right, but I
Can I
think,
just add two quick things that I
Yeah.
think may help with this? One is just a reminder that the set percent appreciation, right, 3% or CPI, that 85% of our deed restrictions say that. That was never intended to be an amount that would cover the house, right? So I just, right, it's a good question, Rachel, because if we're going to use that as a tool for fixing the houses, we have to know if that's enough.
and
I
Tom-
absolutely agree with you that we have to figure out what stuff's going to cost. I did at one point propose to the board that we pause this process as we get the inspections going.
Right.
Because that's how, I mean, we just we do not have the staff to go out and do these kind of estimates right now. That is going to come to us through the inspection process. I do think where we are right now, and I've had this discussion with staff and with the city manager about where are we on hiring staff to support this program. We pulled back because this is sufficiently complex. We're gonna stick with this, and I know the
Yeah.
board's committed to sticking with it.
Right.
We are likely 4 to 6 months away from being done with program development, and then we've got probably another 4 to 6 months of program implementation. So Rachel, I think your answer, the answer you're looking for will come at the time when we get into that, okay, let's look at full implementation of how is this actually gonna work. Thank you.
real quick, Tom has his hand up. And so does
Yeah,
Francie's
just
had
a-
her hand up for a long time, so.
I understand that, you know, Rachel's brought up a very, very, very tough, deep questions that we need to answer, and I don't want to, because I understand where you're going, Carson. We try to keep our eye narrowed on the ball here, but I can't help but making a few comments. Number one is, I think we have to accept the reality that in those lower categories, these people basically can't afford to own a house. That's the problem. Second, there's no guarantee of appreciation to these folks. They're not in these homes to make a real estate investment. They're in these homes to be in the local community, get all those benefits at taxpayer expense. So I think when we talk about what's fair to them, we also have to consider what their circumstances really are and the benefits they've received during the period of their ownership, some of which are incalculable because they're intangibles. But if they can't afford to keep the unit up, they basically shouldn't have gotten the unit. And since they did, who's going to pay? And it's either going to be them or the public, because the buyers certainly shouldn't be in the position to reimbursing the seller for failure to maintain.
Francie?
That's all I wanted to say right now.
Well, I kind of forgotten what I was originally going to say about an hour ago.
20 minutes ago.
It was about Lazy Glen. I want to come back to the thing that Tom was saying, because that's something that I've been talking about for now, I think, 8 months or something. But Lazy Glen, I have a question, Tom, about that. I think that's what I first raised my hand for. I thought I heard somebody say that we don't have any control over the sales and repurchases of Lazy Glen property. And if that is what I heard correctly, I'm concerned that we're still involved with that property. So if a unit sells and it's not up to standards, are we ultimately responsible for that as the organization that we are?
We have to qualify.
Lazy Glen is,
We qualify the buyers.
yeah, we have to qualify everybody there, yeah. But the mobile home parks are, each one of them is a customized, quote-unquote, arrangement that was made with the county when those projects were basically condominiumized. Remember, the homes were there, all the land's owned by one landlord. The residents own their homes, but they don't own the land. Well, the county got them subdivided over time so that the owners wouldn't be in that difficult situation where they own the home and don't own the land and can't control the rent on the land. There are deed restrictions on each one of the parks, including Lazy Glen, and they do have a deed restriction that requires you be living and working in Pitkin County, and they're supposed to come to us and get all the new buyers qualified. But to my knowledge, and Cindy would know more about this, I don't know that we've ever confronted a situation where there was a conflict about the sales price, because the sales prices aren't regulated. They're like RO units. There is no maximum sale price on those units in any kind of deed restriction. So they negotiate sales prices.
Those are as close to
Case by
free
case
market.
basis. And
They are,
and I don't think we've ever we've never intervened in any of that.
We haven't, and some of the owners or some of the sellers have sold for less than what they originally asked for. So because there wasn't a buyer who would spend that amount of money for it. So, but we do still qualify all the.
You have to qualify
purchasers
everybody,
on
and they
that.
have to live in they're supposed to be full-time residents and workers, but they are in charge of policing their own system beyond us qualifying the residents. And basically the market controls their prices, the quality of the unit and demand for the unit.
So if there's a deficiency in the unit that could be life-threatening, I always think of mold as that particular thing, because I know somebody who suffered pretty badly from mold. And it didn't come out at the time of the sale, are we in fact liable for that?
No.
Okay.
We are not
All right, well, that was my
responsible.
question.
Yeah, we're not responsible for monitoring the maintenance of those units, the quality of the units at resale, anything else. We don't step into that. We're just dealing with who gets to live there.
All right, great, Tom. Then the other thing I wanted to address, Carson, if it's okay if I go ahead with another issue,
Sure.
is what Tom was just speaking about, and Rachel and I have been around this before, and Rachel is really wonderful about trying to protect people who need financial help in our county. But I kind of agree with Tom. I mean, I don't want to say those people shouldn't have those units. They should. They should have a place to live and a place that they can call home, and that's what we're all about. And so I do want to support that, but I think there comes a time where if they've lived there for quite a while, at pretty much the generosity of the taxpayers and the work of APCHA, and it comes time that they're moving away, or they want to sell it, or whatever reason they want to sell it, I'm not sure that we can protect them from not making a profit on it. I'm not sure that's our mission, and I'm not sure that it's fair to everybody in the program and all the taxpayers in Pitkin County, although, some of them could afford to house pretty much everybody, but aside from that, I'm not sure it's our mission to guarantee them that they come out of this 10 or 20 years of ownership in a place to live and call home a profit. I'm not sure. I kind of agree with Tom on that if that it was awesome that they got to live in a home that they called their own and that they made payments on, but I'm not sure it's our mission to guarantee them a profit, Rachel, as much as I hate to say that, and I don't want to sound mean, but.
I'm okay with it. I just want it on the deed restriction for everyone who buys. No, the new deed restrictions much more clearly that these are the expectations. And I still, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to protect owners per se, but I think every buyer will be an owner one day, and I think we're already running into people not understanding the expectation. And we want people to move out into smaller units, but will they do that when they're not going to have the money to do so, or they're going to be told they can't do so? And I'm not trying to protect owners only. I'm trying to protect our new buyers as much as anyone else. But we're looking at cost subsidy of the new Burlingame units at over $600,000 a unit. They're going to be sold to people for $300,000 a unit. Are we going to expect them to pay the subsidy for the other $300,000 and take it out? That's fine if we do. I just want to put it up front. I'm the one who said we should stop calling it appreciation, start calling it return on investment, and tell them they can make 5% on their down payment. You know, something like that. But the idea, we give it to you, we take it back, we give it to you, take it back. Your neighbor had more taken away, your neighbor had less taken away. People already are concerned about the certain arbitrariness of it. We get letters all the time. That's what I'm concerned about. I want to make sure it's reasonably well understood, transparent, and fair. That's all I'm asking. And I, you know, that.
So you're asking for more, so you're asking for better communication in a market that's fluctuating, so it would have to be a continually upgraded communication, or are you imagining something that would happen one time with a buyer to say, this is what you can expect, this is what we expect of you, and
Yes.
whatever it is that you want to have communicated? Are you thinking it's a one-time thing, or do we have
I'm
to
thinking
continually
it
upgrade
belongs on the deed restriction, and I think that whatever we're doing here and now is tied into the deed restrictions and the regulations very, very clearly. I mean, I'm waiting for someone to say they don't have to follow the new regulations because their deed restriction says they only have to follow guidelines. You know, lawyers are like that.
Well, they won't get away with basing it on, you know,
Name
name
change.
it's called, I can tell you
We
that.
defined it.
We'll have bigger
Defined it.
problems on
Yeah.
some of those than that.
So, just, I mean, time check.
And how often is this happening?
How often is what happening?
How often is it happening that somebody is selling their unit and they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't afford to make repairs, so I'm gonna lose my initial investment in this? Is this something that's happening a lot?
Hasn't happened yet.
Maybe Cindy?
Not yet.
Ajax Ave.
Well, it still hasn't closed yet.
We've
I'll
seen it
find
in a
it. Eat
couple.
that one.
No,
It's
Francie,
because
also, we
we've seen
haven't
it. We've seen
implemented
the-
anything.
Yeah.
But we've seen the tip of the iceberg, and we don't want to run into that iceberg. Okay,
Okay.
that's what it's about.
I do want to remind folks, while
Right.
we have the 16 Ajax, which, right, how many times has this town experienced a complete gas outage over a 4-day period that's a holiday and freezing cold?
Yeah.
On the other hand, I do want to remind folks about what David said, that most people that he knows, and I quiz people all the time that live in APCHA property, hey, what do you do? How does this work? That we do have owners. The reality is we're not gonna know until we get, until inspections are really rolling. So with that, back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so it's 5:30 and we're so, I think everybody has a question or comment right now. So if maybe we could just sort of try and condense and keep things, you know, to the point so we can move quickly. So Skippy, go ahead.
I'll do my best with that. I really will. I mean,
Said that to skip.
yeah, no. I mean, first and foremost, I don't think any one of us are trying to establish ambiguity or confusion into this system.
No.
So all of these points are great, and I think what I'm hearing is removing uncertainty in the language is awesome. What's also true is we can't know everything before we get in it. If we want to be world famous marine biologists, like we're going to have to take 3rd grade biology before we take organic chem. And so there's just going to be a natural staging, which I think is what Diane's talking about, which I think is healthy. So with that in mind, trying to stick to these. First comment is, you know, we keep talking about standard sellers, and we tried to move that into the sort of capital reserves, and it got confusing. But I wonder if the better framing for this is the buyer's guarantee. Because what we're really doing is building a system for our community, and we're guaranteeing going forwards a product that you can be proud of for every buyer. And if you're a seller, right, you're one of 3 things. Either you're moving to another unit, so you're also a buyer and you want that guarantee. You're moving into the free market locally, in which case you should have had the money to keep up your unit. This should not apply to you, and if it does, shame on you. Or 3, you're leaving the community, and while you've been a great part, to some degree, this program is not here to serve you anymore. It's here to serve the next person. So I wonder if a buyer's guarantee is really how we should be thinking about it. You mentioned a 5th category of the deed restrictions that don't count.
I mentioned it, but it doesn't matter.
Attribute to Rachel.
Just as it, yeah.
Last I heard, last I remember from the packet, it's something like 80 or so units that we think are not in that category. So that's an important category, but I think we need to be constructing this for the 1,400 units this applies to, and being willing to move those 100 units in the right hand and recognize that we're working on updating our deed restriction.
I'm guessing a large portion of those categories where the deed restriction doesn't apply, or they haven't signed a new deed restriction because they've traded hands, are sitting in that 40% below median.
That may be. All I know is the last time we had from staff, it was a number that was substantially small. It was 8% or less of the overall stock, which doesn't mean they're unimportant, but I do think it means we should be building the best program with the best teeth to be effective. Then we need to solve the problem in sequence of how can we create a substantial enough carrot that they'll want to go in there. And in some way, that's how we test our product market fit, right? Which is sort of what Rachel was talking about. As far as these, I have one clarifying question first. Category 4 and 3 are mutually exclusive. Category 4 and 1 and 2 are not necessarily mutually exclusive. So are we saying that even if the inspector deems a Woody Creek or Smuggler trailer park or a 40% below unit to be in acceptable condition, we still buy it every time?
That is their proposal, and please
Okay.
don't call them categories. No. You are correct. It's intended to flow as presented.
Okay.
I understand there may be some overlap, but that is the way it's
Okay, so
proposed.
just as I understand it. So now focus on the questions. I think splitting these up into more categories makes a lot of sense. It helps us treat each situation as it is. What we are also doing here is, from what we've previously talked about, putting a lot more of the work product and onus on APCHA, right? And that has a trade-off. On the positive, we have a lot more control over the quality and the product, which I think is a great thing. In addition, we're guaranteeing a much higher scale of work, which, to the problem you're talking about, Rachel, allows us later to have much more control over adjustments of costs for things ongoing, because we just have more work and we've got more people in the system, right? So I think this substantially supports the conversation you're talking about as a next step, and I see those as very good things in an ideal situation. The trade-off is, of course, just money on hand. Because if we have 50 to 60 flips a year, and I mean, from my very anecdotal looking every Saturday, if there's units available, I'd say our mean price is around $250, and the median is probably around $250, and the mean is around $300, something like that. If you think it takes $100K per unit, it's $400K per turn. So you're talking $20 to $25 million a year. And if you're only flipping it half at a time, it's still 10 to 15 that we're going to piggy bank somewhere to make this function. So, does that make you think like, what are you talking about?
I don't think it
think
costs
of
that much
400K
because
per
the
not all at
revenue
the same
rolls.
time.
It rolls,
Okay.
right?
It's just, what is demonstrably true is that the scale of this is a plus, the control is a plus, but the price tag goes up. And so it's just a matter of where we get that money. So I see this as really great progress. I think we focus on getting something done and recognizing that those other points about bringing in the additional 80 and working on that critical foundational project are actually empowered and enabled by putting the standard in place, because now the problem goes out of the theoretical and becomes real very quickly. Like, we can test what it takes to bring people in by adjusting that number in the deed restriction and see how many people opt in, just like putting something on the shelf at a grocery store. So I see this as really good forward progress.
I do have to let you know that I just did 2 inspection resolutions today for 2 units, and they accepted the unit as is. So there are units out there that are in decent shape.
Like, we're talking about the worst case scenario.
I know, yeah.
I mean, and I'm guessing that's
Well, that's
the
good.
20%.
Yeah, 10 to 20.
Of 100
Yeah.
percent. But you know, like on the price below median, to me that, you know, I hate to call it a profit center, but that's one where we go in, do our work, and then we list it at current market rates. Because there are deals where people go, look what I got. I got this great deal because it hadn't turned over for many years. Look how cheap it was. It was a category 4 unit, so it's one of our higher income categories, and I'm getting it for well below market. And that's one where APCHA can go in, do our work, bring it up to a certain standard. Maybe it is put new carpet, new paint, you know, maybe new appliances, whatever it takes, new fixtures, and then put it back on the market at that category's price point at this point. The other part, Woody Creek and Smuggler, those don't fall in the same category as Lazy Glen and I'm trying to think of the other
Aspen
one.
Village.
Aspen Village.
Aspen Village,
And,
yeah.
and at some point, is that one where we, you know, depending on the level of the mobile home, the product that's sitting on site, do we determine as APCHA and as a housing authority that needs to go away? And then we bring in a more permanent solution, right? The manufactured home, the modular, whatever it is, which probably is easier to maintain, is gonna last longer overall. And then the percentage that Rachel was talking about, 2% per year, that's never intended to be, because in real life, South Dakota, Nebraska, wherever,
That'd be plenty.
the 2% per year, you're taking care of your house, but you might not get 3%, you might not get 4% in your appreciation, you might get, you know, you just need to take care of it and hope for the best when you sell and you're selling in the right market.
Yeah.
We have a sense of entitlement in this housing program where people say, I get my 3%, I should get it. And at some point, the paradigm needs to shift to that, you're not entitled to that 3%, and maybe the deed restriction is a token 1% appreciation, and APCHA in the city of Aspen and Pitkin County maintain all of these units, and you get to live here because, you know, you get to live here.
The city does, I think the city does something along that line for the units that they have in their inventory for city employees. It's different, they get some
There's a
type
lot
of
of different rules
appreciation,
there.
but some of it, there's a certain amount of work that the city does, and then.
If you're in
yeah.
subsidized housing, it is not the same as your nest egg. You've lived in your home for 30 years and you're saving for retirement. Sorry, that's not the same vehicle. So you better be an adult and be looking at other alternatives to saving money.
John, I do think, and I'll only wax poetic for a moment, I do think that is the value of having ownership units, is that it's that difference from rent, right? You are building some equity in a product, and we want that for our community.
Well, we do, but we
Right,
also.
but not at a
Tax break.
profit,
Get a
absolutely.
tax break too.
Your point is you should take that opportunity and invest elsewhere if you're gonna save.
You
for
can
yourself.
live here affordably, don't go to the vacation in Cancun every off-season. Like, at some point, I mean, I grew up and we didn't take vacations every year. My folks worked their tail off, so.
Carson, do you wanna go to Kelly?
What's that?
You wanna
Kelly's,
go to Kelly?
David showed you not.
It's hard to see her hand.
Oh, yeah, Kelly.
It's really hard.
yes, the light right behind it.
I will be quick, but I just will say, you know, as we continue to like revisit conversations, that for me, I think there's 3 components that are essential to a program to maintain our current inventory. And I think one of those is that we reward the sellers who have done the work to keep their property up to in good condition. We penalize the opportunities for financial gain for those who have not done it. And then we recognize that there will be an ongoing commitment and subsidy. Because to answer Rachel's question, no, I do not think we can expect someone who's bought a $300,000 home to maintain it to a $900,000 standard, or a $600,000 standard. And that, you know, will become more and more difficult for the lower categories to do as well. And so, you know, what I appreciate about these groupings is there are components in here of all three of those facets of a good maintenance program, because it does consider a way that the seller might, you know, recoup the total of their gains. It does get after those who have not kept their property up, and sort of in here somewhere, and, you know, through rights of first refusal and our ability to invest, it recognizes that we are going to have an ongoing subsidy. Like, this is the maintenance program of our development program from 40 years, right? So that's kind of how I look at it. I do think that it's fair that we take it away at the end rather than, you know, cut the opportunities off at the beginning, because then there's no incentive. So that's my thought on that. And then a couple of just things that I think we could parking lot as future related policy conversations, or are whether we buy the category 1 and 2 units and turn them into rentals, and then start looking at, you know, making up those conversions in future development, so we maintain kind of a balance between the ownership market and the rental market. And then also, here's my other note. Oh, considering whether there is some sort of depreciation escrow that prevents all of the repairs getting saddled on the last seller. That over time, you know, everyone is taking some sort of responsibility for those depreciations.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Rachel.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything Kelly has said there, pretty exactly. The one thing that we have to bear in mind is we're talking about using any of that money for the livability standards and so on. That could be a unit in a deficiently funded HOA organization, and we want to make sure that they're not buying into a special assessment debt right off the bat as well. So it's possible some of those revenues that equalize should be used there. The second is just to say it perhaps a little more clearly. I look at it now as a real chance to evaluate a program that's been in effect for 50 plus years, and to say what has worked out of that program, what has not worked, what should we continue and improve, and what should we jettison. And that is kind of the question for me about appreciation of our, and I can appreciate what Kelly is saying, it's a reward if it's done right, but we need to make that very clear, or more clear. I know it's in legalese in our deed restriction now. I'm talking about plain language, and I'll let that go. But this is our real chance to say what was flawed logic of the past, what was unrealistic expectations, what were shortcomings in the program, and correct them all now. So that's why I've been trying to say, let's really take a harder look at how do the numbers play out over time, so that when we're acknowledging it's going to be a $2 million a year into a maintenance account that we need to allocate out of city funds or something, we start to have a picture of that, an idea of that, of where does it come from and what is the ongoing outcome from this as past problems are cured. Thank you.
Allison, and then Skip.
One technicality question that if it is a long answer, I'm happy to take offline, but don't we essentially sell to APCHA and then back to the owner for every sale? Isn't there that moment during your closing where you're kind of putting it in the APCHA lot, and then so this, in that case, we kind of don't even need well, I think that could be worked into the right of first refusal for any properties, if that's the case. And then secondly, some of the stuff that Rachel's referring to, I actually also wrote down and agree with more under policy question 2, which I'm sure we are rushing toward. But just to differentiate some of the comments about a roof or a siding and HOA and capital reserves, that's not exactly what my understanding is that we're talking about here, and I think it is why it's helpful to separate single-family homes or trailers from the rest of these. But my understanding is that we're really talking about what you were able to maintain within your unit, and did you, and is it livable, and not some of those bigger, structural things that might come up, but wasn't necessarily the homeowner at the time fault or anything like that, that some bigger issues are going that might be a whole complex-wide issue.
Okay. So maybe just, so looking at the questions that we've outlined, I think that, as far as the grouping approach that staff has outlined, I think everybody sounds like is comfortable moving forward with that. I think we're good there.
I do think just for with the spirit of, and to make sure we don't end up keep talking about it, of getting the whole, I have added a piece, homes that are not subject to, quote, APCHA regulations as updated from time to time. Just so that exists, we know, hey, this is the outlier.
Yep.
We don't have to go back to it.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, I agree with that.
And I think I heard the board at least willing to consider that APCHA may take ownership and may take action on these. I think we can delay final decision on that for a little bit as we continue to move through the program and look at what is at some point we'll have to build a financial model to point out what Skippy talked about as far as how would the dollars roll in a program if we had, how many sales? 200 and...
No.
Per
year?
130?
Maybe 50 or
60.
60 or 60. Oh, right, you gave me the high of 70 a year.
Yeah.
If we've got that kind of roll, what are the financials look like and what kind of dollars do we need? As well as kind of what burden is that on the organization. So, Mr. Chairman, I think, Mr. Board Chair, I think we're ready to go to number 2 if you'd like.
Okay.
Well, I just want, on that point, I think it's a good question to ask. Does anyone not think that's a good solution? Because if it is a good solution, then the question is just what's the price tag and can we do it?
Right.
And it seems like everyone thinks it's a good idea, but I just want to clarify because really the question then is dollars and getting an estimate on that
Right.
sooner than later. This is the year of the mega ret, and we sit on council and we'd like to build more housing, but I think all of us on council have said, let's patch the hole in the roof before we build more. So there's extra money that isn't planned for that's being collected this year. That's a great place for this initial piggy bank, and we'd like to know sooner than later.
That's going to be a really important part of it, because that
Yeah.
could be a really, really, really big number.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's going to be on a rolling basis
Right.
annually and things like that, but there's no question, it's kind of like CDOT got to a point where it's like, we can't build any more intersections, we got to take care of the roads we got. And I think that's pretty clear now.
How about straight shots? Oh, wait.
Modified direct, board, modified.
Okay.
Ouch. We should talk.
All right, so we've kind of dipped our toe into question 2 a little bit. Diane, did you have anything you wanted to add there, or?
It may be because you've already started into this. It may be worthwhile to take policy question 2 and 3 at the same time.
Okay.
Right? This is essentially the underlying piece I've heard is some willingness on the part of the city and county to consider some program, and there's no discussion yet of would that be loan, would it be a matching grant, what would that look like? Would it be just, hey, we're going to hold sellers responsible up to X point, and then we're just going to use monies to address first turn?
Yeah.
What would that be? Thank you.
Tom, did you have something to add here?
Just a word of caution on when you talk about appreciation is that I think most of the deed restrictions, maybe all of them, have stated in them a right to appreciation, however expressed, whether it's CPI or a percentage or both, either or. So we can't go at the problems we have with those units by directly, by taking away the appreciation, unless we have that short interim ownership that Allison is talking about. At the same time, while they have that right to appreciation, they also have an obligation of the minimum standard. So that's the direction that would have to come from. One of those two things: either you enforce the minimum standards, or at a negotiated price, APCHA buys the unit with a reduction for the minimum standards.
And thank you, Tom. That is the premise on which this is based, right? We do have,
Okay, just wanted to be
yep,
clear.
we've
on
got the
that.
regulations, right? We have minimum standards in the regulations. What we don't have is the teeth to enforce them right now.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
And, Maddie, will you just go to policy question 3? So the first one is like the who pays, and is this different for first turn? And then basically where's that money going to come from? I've heard the board kind of tackle all those at once. And I do think given the board's discussion so far, I've heard a general willingness to reduce appreciation to some point for certain life safety minimum standards. And I've heard a not wanting to go below someone's purchase price, which is how we protect someone who just bought 2 years ago and their legacy problems. And I've heard an interest in addressing the first turn differently to address if we have legacy issues and not burdening the current owner with that. Is that a fair summary of where I believe the board's at right now?
Yeah, I think so.
I believe so.
So we may just be, how are we gonna get the money?
I think that's really the question, is what does it cost and how do we get the money?
Well, and I guess there's different concepts of it, but part of it has been expressed by Skippy and others of what if it was a revolving loan fund, and when the unit is purchased after the repairs, there's repayment. Now, sometimes it might be, extraordinary, like Ajax Ave or something, but for the most part, if it's going to be added to the purchase price and partially from the seller and partially from the purchase price, there you have it.
Which is an idea David suggested.
Yes.
Yeah.
And David has joined us.
Yes.
I would question if you're going to take X amount from the seller and X amount added onto the purchase price, that should just be covering repairs. We're not trying to make a profit off of people's sales beyond the cost of those repairs to bring it up to, because we've talked about equalizing somewhat within categories. If you took 40,000 from the seller and added 40,000 on the price and it's still 100,000 below market, we're not talking about APCHA saying we'll take it all the way up and make a profit off you guys.
I've got John's concept. I've got John's concept as a note. I didn't want to follow that
I would
rabbit
just
hole.
say if you're going to just add that price difference for the repairs and just magically throw on another 40,000 because it equalizes prices, you really shouldn't have been taking anything from the seller to do
Why?
it.
Because they didn't do their work?
No, because if they were allowed to take the same profit that APCHA is planning on taking and saying, well,
But
hey,
we're doing the work.
well, maybe that seller could be able to do the work. If you told someone, hey, if you bring this up to standards, you can sell it for 150,000 more than you bought it for. You just have to do the work. We'll let you price it at what current category fours are going.
But that
That would
person's
bypass their deed
walking away with
restriction,
that
right?
money.
No,
whereas
but
we
we're
are putting
talking
it back
about
into
by-
the program.
Okay,
Okay,
never mind.
years.
We'll make a profit off of everybody we can in the
No, I
program.
think
no, but I just-
Who own their units for 30 years, we're gonna take the money from them, and then we're gonna take 100,000 profit by readjusting it up to where category
I think
fours
that
are
is a
now.
question for another day.
I think that the strongest rational argument for why you wouldn't do that on that turn is, by definition, if it's one of those properties, it's an older property, right? And so you're bringing it up to the livable standard for this person, but it's logical to think that in the next turn, some of those deeper infrastructure, like structural things, will have caught up over time, and you're going to need that buffer again to move it up on the next turn, right? Without then expending the price past what a new unit would be.
Like on some of those, you've been in the unit for a long time. I'm not saying we're taking from them at one point. We're just going to say that's what we're selling it at, right? You're selling it at your agreed upon appreciation. It's probably an antiquated deed restriction to begin with, so they get their appreciation. But we also know there's $50,000 worth of work on a unit that is going to price $150,000 or some number. I'm throwing those numbers out there, but at that point, if we're going to take the unit and we buy it and we give them the 30-year resident their full sales price, because that was their agreed upon
Right.
That was
Yeah,
in their
I
deed
got
restriction.
that.
And then we do the work to bring it up to a livable standard, probably do some other things. And then we put it back on the market at whatever that market rate is for that category. We should profit from that.
Well,
Well,
I would look at
Can I
it,
just
just simply
suggest
one
we-
last.
We
Sorry,
table
I'm-
this
I'm
one right
sidetracked.
now,
I have to finish just really quickly, I'm sorry. But I think that would point out, John, that we have been unreasonable with our limited appreciation amount. That we acknowledge that the people in category 4 can now afford this. And we've told you, you have to keep it down to here rather than reinvesting in your own unit. I think it would make subject of great question of why are you artificially keeping people's prices so low so that you can take a profit out of them later rather than let them actually earn the money they need to keep the unit up in the first place. I think that's how it would be
But that's
looked
how we
at.
changed our deed restriction to begin with, is we allowed them to put 100, whatever the number was, right? We had 10% of the unit before.
Well, we haven't changed that yet, we've talked about it.
Well, but other, then going above and beyond on some of those, right? And they get a new deed restriction. But that was the agreement they made.
Right, I
The
understand.
2%, 3%, whatever that appreciation was when they bought it. And so now, they've sat in it so long, they've lived in it, they've enjoyed the benefits of living and working and serving and being part of the Aspen community. And all we're doing is just taking it to whatever the market is today. Because then the next person that buys it goes, wow, right? I said that. Wow, I got a great unit, because did you believe this? It hadn't sold for 40 years. And now the unit is worth, you mean,
Yeah. Well, okay, we'll let it go.
So what I'm gonna suggest, this is a great conversation, it is one to revisit. I call these four things, I call them segments, I'm trying to think of a synonym for category. So those segments of homes, I think when we quantify how many fall into each, then it'll be an indication of, hey, when do we need to have that discussion? Is this our profit center? I sort of agree with John that it might be an opportunity. I don't think it's the fundamental
it's not gonna
question
be a
right
huge
now.
profit center.
Here's the fundamental question. Let's say 20 million. Let's say 20 million appeared for APCHA to be able to implement a program. I think the big question is, do you want units to change categories or not? And the reason I ask that is, if you do a loan program, you are likely to push some properties into a new category and push them up. And we already know that we've had that category inflation just naturally over 50 years. If you look at the potential to do a partial grant, right? And I'm not saying like you're gonna give huge financial
got it.
benefit to people who haven't taken care of their property. It's to address the first turn, properties that have deteriorated over time. If we looked at a grant loan combination program, you may be able to keep that cap from pushing stuff into higher categories. Thank you. Wow, that was a killer.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So the question is not where would we get or should we get money to float the work until it's repaid. You're saying, should we be putting money into people's pockets?
Not
Into
not
the
people's
unit.
pockets, into the
unit.
program.
Into the program. But this would only apply if the delta between the new max. Okay, I understand. Okay.
probably would be more towards, it would probably be more towards that lower category, right, as a grant program, to keep it. If we wanted to keep that in the category 1 or 2 level, right?
I think it could be there.
The
The other
stratification.
place it could be is in properties that just deteriorated over time through age.
Does it even, it makes sense to certainly think about this now, but I'm wondering if it makes sense to make this decision now, whereas we're now stepping into the place of home track where we better understand the needs of the community on a rolling basis, and there may be a time where we actually want different categories, so the grant aligns with the community goal and facilitates it, where another time we may not want that category to move, and so I did it the other way around, but a grant would actually keep it in the category. And so would it be better to make that decision at the time based on the community need?
I'm actually suggesting this to address first turn.
Just the first
I
turn.
think, I believe, I don't know yet, we don't have
Right.
we don't have the data from home inspections yet. I believe, and the board has, you all have articulated that first turn problem of not wanting to burden someone who bought the property 5 years ago, that has a sloped floor, that is 20-year-old problem, 40-year-old problem, with that burden. So I look at the grant piece as a first turn only and not exclusive, right? I think you need to do it in conjunction with having some seller skin in the game on this.
And the percentage of our workforce working in certain categories does not match the percentage of housing in those categories, and more so on the lower categories. So, there's a lot more percentage category 1 and 2 workers than there are category 1 and 2 percentage houses.
And it's
which is why a lot of people
and it's
live
getting
in that.
worse.
So I don't want to make that problem and that mismatch worse.
Right.
And it's, I just was reading some
I don't
data the
wanna
other
make that
day, and
worse.
it's frightening. I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah. I don't want to make that worse.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy enough to say all of our employees have benefited so much from being here, but there's also the side of employees just constantly having their rent raised as soon as they make another $1 an hour, and awfully lot of them feeling fairly abused out there right now in this community and going, wow, did I make a mistake with my life? Now, of course, people have to evaluate that themselves, but going, I always thought this was my community, but it's really not. I can't stay here. I can't enjoy any of the things anymore. And, I think our lower working class are feeling pretty exploited, would be the best way to say it at this point in time, and looked at as disposable. As very, very disposable, and someone else will come in to take care of our lower end needs, and it's not a good feeling that's out there in that community.
Excuse me, Carson, you, in the chair position, you haven't really had an opportunity to share your thoughts. Do you want to jump in?
Push him. There you go.
Yeah, all of this, this is going to be such a, I think when I look at this, knowing what the construction industry looks like, what some of the concerns that we've got across this, this is a massive lift. We're talking about big change. And, to Kelly's point, I think Kelly made a great point about, rewarding the people who do take care of their property. Because, I do think we want to have some aspect to that to incentivize. We don't want to get a call every time the shower head breaks or whatever, right? So I do think that we do need to have some incentive for people who are taking care of their property. And then, when it comes to the first turn and capital improvements and how do we handle all that? I think a lot of that is tied into it's going to be different. Every one of these groups that we've got is going to have a completely different scenario, because you could have a townhome and somebody buys in, the townhome is great on the inside, no slope floor, whatever, and then the next, in 5 years the foundation cracks, right, and then that person's stuck with a massive problem. So this is I look at this and just sort of go down the road of the complexities and the cost and how do we manage this and also maintain the incentive or the incentive to continue to keep your property up. It is.
Yeah.
This is.
Well, we're touching here, and the focus has been on single-family homes, right? A lot of it trailers, single-family homes, but to really scratch the surface on what we own or what we manage, I guess, is you got to get HOAs involved, got to get HOAs to play like adults. I just had a conversation today with a really good friend, and I've brought this up before. He's talking about his HOA, 27 roofs, they're 20-some years old. He's tried to do a special assessment to get the HOA involved to fix fix the roofs, but replace the roofs as needed. And the comment from a lot of those homeowners is, why would I fix the roof for the next person?
Yeah.
Which is really frustrating when you look at it, because that, to me, a roof, paint, whatever, those are all maintenance things that need to be maintained and taken care of.
Yeah.
You know, I own a house, I gotta replace the roof at some point, I know that. I've gotta replace the boiler, I gotta do certain things. HOAs, and we know one on the other side of the river over there that was the same way. They have to play the game forward thinking to reserve and take care of stuff.
Tom?
I think, Carson, what you're saying just reinforces the idea that, by definition, our buyers and sellers have limited financial resources, and if a foundation needs to be, major reconstruction or replacement on a single-family home in the inventory, neither party is going to be able to pay for it. I mean, that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's this subsidy idea is, or the APCHA buys and resells at a higher price. That's I don't see what alternative there is realistically.
Right. Well, but
And
to me,
I
that
think,
speaks to the
John, I think your
restriction.
comment about the profit, I mean, I don't think it's so much profit, I think it's making sure that the program can pay for itself, right? And so it's
Your reinvestment into
it's
the
a
program.
reinvestment back into the entire program. It's not a profit, right? I mean, nobody's taking the money. I mean, it's a reinvestment.
It's a reinvestment into the community.
So I think I've heard at least conceptual agreement with we need to come to you with a financial model now that says, and it's not going to be perfect, but it's basically, if we look at what our average sales have been, and we look at what the different segments of those units that were, these ones we would take right of first refusal, and we say, we take a guess at how many would we own at once, what would we put into it? Can we assume that there would be some combination of a grant and loan program created? And then I think the real hard question is, are the elected officials on this board willing to go back to your respective bodies and have that conversation? And I know we don't have a specific number to give
Yeah.
to you, but I can tell you it's gonna be more than 5 million.
I mean, it's already happened. I mean, we've talked to every council member.
We've talked to people, we haven't had a number.
Right, they've asked for a number, but
And
everyone said I'm
people want
interested.
more specifics about how it plays through, more than anything else. But, yeah, I think it's just, you can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. You have to put money where money is needed. But I do think that there's gonna be a lot of concern about the details and the HOA, and I've suggested before that as we sell these units, to the extent, and I've been told that when someone sells, they have to turn over their HOA docs to Cindy for the new buyer, so they might have some sense as to how funded or underfunded those HOAs are. And I know we're looking to future full inspection programs or whatever, but we're not there yet. But even if it's a temporary program to create an escrow account for that new buyer, to say, look, your HOA is only charging you $190 a month, but they should be charging $290 a month. We're gonna have you escrow an automatic payment as well to HOA that the housing office is holding for you. And when you get hit with that special assessment, we'll release that money. And then when your HOA starts charging the appropriate amount, your escrow with us will go away. But do something that encourages the HOAs to get up to speed and doesn't let someone get hit with it later. And if there is a price increase made after all repairs are made, I think some of that money would go in that escrow account for that unit, for that person, for the HOA when it makes its big move.
This is probably a stupid question, but for Burlingame 3, I mean, so those new deed restrictions that we're getting ready to sign, I mean, do those have a mechanism in there that will, I mean, because.
I know Diane is thinking about it
Because
and others, but.
To me, like, I mean,
I
a
think
simple
we
fix, if you're starting from zero and you're moving forward, I mean, a simple fix would be, every X number of years, the HOA has to have a capital reserve study. and they have to be funded at 100% of whatever the capital reserve study says. And then, you know,
Yeah, two things
from
on
day
that.
one.
right, from day one.
Those are the types
Well,
of things
yeah.
I know, talk to Diane about, is like what can be proactively put in the deed
Right.
restriction in the future to avoid any of the problems we've had in
Well,
the past,
To
period.
avoid an HOA going, man,
Can we
what are we
maintain,
reserve this for? I want my nut as small as possible.
Yeah,
Let's
but-
lower all
Right,
of our
like
costs.
Burlingame too,
Right,
they would,
right.
you know, probably say, well, we don't want any reserve, but it's like, no, you
No.
start
I think
now.
both starting them with the right reserve to
Right.
begin with,
Yeah,
and then having some requirements, and maybe even if there's an ability to maintain some ownership or voting right in that, but this is where the legals are having to work it out with new deed restrictions. I want it to really be a model for all projects going forward, things like that. But the other side of it is the longer debate with HOAs is going to be, shouldn't we only have to fund it 80% because we can finance the other 20%? And are you requiring us to have unrealistic cash value versus we have the ability to finance what we need?
Right.
So I'm just
Whatever
saying,
the number
whatever
is,
it
right,
is, but
we should do something.
you'll hear that pushback
but-
from HOAs,
right,
that's all I
but
know.
That's
should-
fine, on a free market HOA, that makes 100%, in fact, whatever. But on a subsidized housing program, we should never
Accept
fall
that.
for that.
Yeah, well, again, I'm
Yeah.
just saying, I know that's how it's been done before. Hunter Creek has financed its boilers, other people have financed this and that, and if we're,
Tom's got his hand
Yeah,
up, and so
so-
does Kelly.
it's a new requirement on
Question-
HOAs.
Question for Carson and John. I'm assuming that a lot of these buyers in these deed restricted, for these deed restricted units are really pushing the limit on qualifying. How are new additional escrow requirements going to affect their ability to get loans?
You know, they got, it matters. I mean, like, there's the stuff, we financed a few
Yeah.
up by, Lift One, and those have some sizable HOA dues. Makes a lot of sense. But yeah, that matters too. That impacts their buying power for sure.
Yeah.
Because they get
That's
calculated
just
in
something I
that
wanted to
mortgage
throw out there.
calculation today.
Kelly?
I just want to put a plug for something I've suggested in the past regarding this question about HOAs. You know, I continue to think that once we get a feel of the health of the HOAs that are out, the financial health of the HOAs that are out there, that restricting the in-complex bid opportunity for those that are not in good financial health, to me, is something we should consider.
And just a heads up,
You mean bidding to leave or bidding to get into 'em?
complex bids.
In-complex bids. So to me, an in-complex bid, rewards people who've invested in the community and gives them first priority to stay in that community. I think that argument goes away when you have HOAs who are very underfunded.
Great,
Yeah.
okay, I got you, thank you, I was just wondering.
Two quick points, and then we'll move on, because we're at
Yeah.
6:15. The one is, Bethany and Cindy brought up last week, and we are talking to community development right now. In fact, I've got a meeting with Philip at noon tomorrow, where they have had the idea of putting into, and they've, excuse me, talked to Tom about this, putting in the development code a requirement for new developers and new HOAs to meet those requirements, fee studies, et cetera. So that's on one hand. I think we all know the issue is historical HOAs. We haven't thrown that out, but I will say I really appreciate the focus. And I think we've moved this to a point where I think I have some conceptual agreement. I guess my question is it, are you all considering like city funding, or is there any county funding potential, or does that not
Take all
matter?
You know, we know
Yeah.
from the city side that the county funds APCHA from its general fund, that its only housing funds come from new growth as mitigation dollars, and that they are struggling to finish the financial rebuild of Phillips Curve and the maintaining of the mobile home park. So I think we're the ones with the nest egg at the city level. If we can just keep maintaining the staffing needs at a level 50-50, maybe we can talk to our colleagues about creating this fund.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what I think. And if there's federal grants or state grants, as Kelly has constantly been saying, that would apply to this, that are either energy efficiency components or whatever, let's go after those grants. And I think people are kicking around the idea of trying to get something on the ballot for 2022 that would allow real estate transfer taxes to be asked in Colorado communities with voter approval, and then perhaps the county could ask for a real estate transfer tax from its voters for housing.
We had a group of people trying to take some of that the real estate transfer tax, and do a petition to get it on the ballot for this.
Yeah. I don't know that we want to go
What is the
there.
point of the transfer tax anyway? If we're gonna collect this 1% from every sale transaction, I thought the transfer tax was to go towards housing.
It was housing and the arts.
No, those are two separate tax questions at two separate times.
But to me, you have a huge pool of money
Yeah, I
from
know.
a transfer tax, like, that's where this should come from.
Well, that's what we're talking about, talking to our colleagues about, is using the housing real estate transfer tax dollars to be able to support this program. We cannot touch the Wheeler transfer tax dollars.
The way I think about it, John, and the way I'll kind of pitch it with my colleagues is, there's been a lot of negatives for Aspen during the last year and a half of COVID. One of the clear standout positives is a 1.7x take on the housing transfer tax. And why not take that additional thing we didn't budget for, expect, and make a nest egg that's going to live on and sustain our existing housing stock in perpetuity?
Or start to.
I mean, that goes to.
Or, not in perpetuity.
Fix
For a
that
while.
problem. At least have a solution to maintain what we have
Yeah, that's
before
right.
we build more.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we'll actually do both, but I think we can.
And for the city elected officials, please help staff stay out of the chicken or egg discussion, because this, at the point at which we need to know what kind of funding we're gonna have access to, will be before everything is done.
Right, okay.
So,
Well, we'll start some more serious conversations and
Yeah.
use the 5 million number you'd like to start with.
I said that would, 5 million
You
wouldn't
said
be enough.
25.
I don't
No,
think
I
that-
said 20.
No, I'm talking,
Well, I was saying if we
I
had to
think we
do a
need to
full
think
year of
about it
funding, it's
in
20
a
to
few
25.
years.
So, I
What's
know,
the
I'm just
turnover?
teasing.
Yes,
Time
I-
period of how much do you think
it's
you
probably
might
half
need
that.
over a
60, I
3-year
would give it a
period, and then
60%
go
number.
forward. We can't
Yeah,
commit future
so 15,
councils.
I mean.
I don't
Yeah.
think people will set aside 20 million at once.
I understand that, and I do know the next pieces I'm coming back with is we'll work a little bit on those segments and what that looks like, and then a financial model that if we had a combination loan and grant, how would it work? How many units would we be working on at one time? And try to come up with a better number and what that contribution from, we sell it, it goes back into the pot, and what our run rate essentially is.
The other solution that needs to be dealt with, and Carson mentioned it, is the construction industry having contractors or people, the red light phone or something,
You can actually do the
that
work.
would come do the work, because
I
a
mean-
lot of these guys don't get on job sites
I think
without
that
getting paid well.
the only way that you're gonna be able to do that, you're gonna have to have your own staff.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't know how you can do it otherwise.
And we may need to find great staff from out of state, give them housing,
Well,
move
and
them
it's,
here.
look,
And then when they leave to go get the higher paid jobs, we gotta bring in new ones.
I mean, when the board,
mean,
when the previous board
Yeah,
went and did the
no.
habitat thing, I've mentioned it before, but when previous board did the habitat day, there was a guy there that was working there, and he was the supervisor or whatever, and I just asked him, how'd you get this? And he said, well, I was running my own company, and I was billing people, and I was chasing down trying to find employees, and running from this job and to that job with my head cut off, with my head cut off, running around. And he said, look, I just wanted something stable and less drama, and
There's
maybe
people out there.
maybe
who-
there are people out there that would say, you know what, I'm tired of doing that. And so I don't know.
Know where you're gonna get paid. And
Yeah, right.
if you're gonna get paid and not negotiate it down. whatever.
Exactly.
Which,
Fire
to
and
that
leave.
point, please congratulate Cindy on, we are about to be fully staffed in our maintenance department for the first time since I've been working with
All right.
APCHA.
Congratulations, Cindy.
And actually, that 300 square foot Ajax condos property that APCHA owns?
Yeah.
It will be rented to the new staffer.
Great.
Of course, we have major issues with that property that we're gonna have a special assessment, so it's a good thing that we're gonna be getting some rent out of it.
Yeah. All right, comments. I'll just start on Zoom. Francie?
I'm all good.
All right, David?
Nothing to say.
David, do you have any comments?
He's on mute.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
I'm very impressed with everybody's input so far, and I think we're really moving in the right direction.
Thanks. Kelly?
Don't have anything tonight. Thank you.
Allison?
Slightly off topic, but Rachel mentioned how hard our lower category workers have been working, and that it's not been the best thing to wake up and go to work for every day for a year now. So APCHA is doing Guest Services Appreciation Month, and I've been talking to a lot of them already this month, and I think that it's just good to acknowledge. Rachel, I'm glad you brought that up, and want to say that too. And I just did a poll of our members. 75% of businesses are not having a fall off season closing this year, so there's not a breath coming yet, and it's just the politeness and the acknowledgement is really appreciated.
Rachel?
I have no additional comments. Thank you for considering mine, whether I deliver them well or not.
John?
I enjoy the banter, Rachel, by the way. So I'd like to come. No other comments. I think it has been a good meeting.
Allison's right. Off season is dead. Sad but true. Happy birthday to Rachel.
Candles. I need to make my wish to win the state lotto before 7.
Yeah, I do have one comment. I want to first just
Happy
wish
birthday.
Rachel a happy
Thank you.
birthday, and
Thank you.
for 3 decades of service. I really appreciate it.
Just about.
My comment is just to follow up. It was raised as a potentiality of no longer having ownership in category 1 and 2. We're discussing
We're
this.
2 and 3. We don't have ones. We do.
We do.
We do.
We do.
Have any?
Not very many, but we do.
We do have one.
And just the general misalignment that is real. So I'm not hearing that from any particular way, but I do want to comment on that. I'll try and be as logical and dispassionate as I can, but I'm quite passionate about this. If what we want to talk about at some point is the reality of our circumstance as such that it is no longer of primary benefit to our community and the homeowner to have an ownership situation, and is there a better model for everybody who can't afford a home in Aspen? Something I'm willing to talk about. But I think the idea of segmenting off the most needy or the most in need in our community and saying, for you, this asset, this community benefit is no longer available, when it is still available to other people who make more but also can't afford it.
Yeah.
Like, let's be clear, right? We're only going to subsidize relatively wealthy people, but not those most in need, is absolutely not in the spirit. And if we talk about feeling thrown out or whatever, what we will be doing unintentionally, but by policy, is saying if you don't make a lot, we are going to make sure that hole is as hard for you to climb out of as possible, because you don't get the benefit of not throwing your money away every month. But for those who earn more, we're going to leave that ladder in the bucket so they can climb up throughout their careers. And I think that would be a catastrophically bad decision. So either we need to talk about it for everybody and address the reality, but I'm not willing to pull the ladder up on those most in need in the community.
You raise a great point, Skippy, and I don't want it to sound like a snarky comment, but if you talk to the renters at Centennial right now, they're not very happy with the insecurity of someone else having bought their property, what they're going to do with their property, are they going to move, are they going to have to move, and everyone in a rental situation feels that way. They feel less insecure, and I don't feel like we have any problems with it now, but I certainly in the past have heard from renters in APCHA projects feeling like they're walking on eggshells because did the property manager not like them, or they're going to get this or that. Again, this is past history, but being a renter is different. It's a different world. Yeah. You don't build equity, you get higher credit card rates, and you don't climb out of the bucket, as you're saying. But, when we've talked about seniors moving out, or if we created a rental senior complex or something, that's the exact same question for seniors. will I have security and reliability? If you get me to sell my unit and move here, will you tell me I've become too difficult a tenant in 2 years? Will I lose the rental after I sold my house? And so a lot of fear drives decisions of homeowners or renters or people within this community at this point in time about losing their housing, you know, and you have to be able to offer some reliability and stability to anyone who wants to really become a renter. I think Skippy is right in the biggest sense is that our policies over time will change community character and community makeup. You know, if we become an all rental community, much easier to deal with. But that would be a very different community than people feeling they have ownership here and are creating a full life here. You know, so I really agree with what you're saying. This does come back once again to this bigger question of are our area medium income categories even remotely correct to our workforce? And we just don't know that.
Listen, no, I mean, your comment was a lot or some number, right? If you don't make a lot. Should that be amended to you don't make enough? And it's real hard not to make enough if you want to work. I mean,
my comment is,
my kid was making $35 an hour,
Yeah.
and he's a knucklehead.
Well, I wish they were paying that over at City Market to their employees.
Well,
That's why the
No,
shop's
I
not
agree.
stocked
I
anymore.
agree, but it's also like, you know, he was getting tips, and I mean, he's a knucklehead, right? I mean,
Well, he's living a life right now that may or may not work for him later, but.
Yeah, my comment was simply that we have made a choice as a community that we want those who work here and make this place run, have the opportunity to live here and be part of the community. And if we are going to say that that opportunity should only be available to those who can afford it, well, guess what? You and you and you and me, we're all out, right?
But that's not what anybody's saying.
Nobody's saying
Skippy. Nobody's saying that. And so, I mean,
No,
I think Rachel has made it several times a really good point about, you know, I mean, so I think your point about rentals, valid, I think, right? I mean, there's ways you could address that with the city being the landlord. I mean, as far as I know, the city is, I mean, if the city is the landlord, right, you're not getting kicked out unless there's a pretty severe reason, right? So, but I think, you know, Rachel's point about expecting people to maintain, I mean, if you've got a category 1 that's a $50,000 or a $75,000 purchase or a $100,000 purchase price, whatever it is, and then you've got, and it's a $900,000 property. I mean,
Or 400
The
or something.
delta
Still,
whatever the number
unquestionably-
is.
There's still a
The
gap.
delta
There's a gap.
unquestionably grows.
Yeah.
But it
Right.
is also true that as we're talking about, the person in category 3 and category 4 also needs some sort of structural adjustment if we're gonna have a realistic expectation. And so we should not be
quite likely.
punishing those most in need
All right.
and
Yeah.
putting money
I
in the
know.
pockets of those least in
I
need.
don't want to get into another discussion.
I
so-
move we adjourn.
Hold on, I have some
Oh,
comments.
sorry.
and-
Oh, sorry.
And these
I thought
kind of
you
go to
said-
all of this, so.
Okay, good.
Everything, we're dealing with some super complicated problems, and they're all interconnected, and it's a game of whack-a-mole. You change this one and this one pops up. So, two things. One, just thank you to everybody. I mean, everybody is very engaged. I appreciate it. This is a difficult, these are all difficult problems that many people have tried to address previously in the past, and it just sort of fizzled out. So I'm grateful to everybody's engagement, and I'm glad that this is the board that is going to move forward and tackle all this. And two, just from a chair standpoint, obviously today's my first role or my first day in the chair here. So just, you know, if there's suggestions you've got for me, I'm happy to hear them, and really just kind of interested in making sure that this is a productive use of everybody's time, and that we, the 8 of us and staff are the group that sort of tackle these problems that have historically been too big to tackle. So
Yeah.
thank you.
No, thank you, Carson, for stepping up. I mean, my word, it's important. I have one small thing I want to say, just because it's a clear the record.
It's your birthday. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about birthday privilege. But there was a mention about the city housing ownership pool, and I really just want to point out that there's some very key differences for that. It's a hybrid form of ownership. If someone were to lose their job in the city, they have to move out very quickly. And if they lose their job in APCHA, they just have to find another job to create their opportunities. They don't lose their housing at the same time. They also cannot retire into their units. So that's a big difference, that you are building up your potential retirement home with APCHA, but with the city you're not. And you cannot leave your unit to your children. And so I just don't want everyone to think it's on par with our program, yet they get some maintenance dollars when they don't. They don't have the same type of ownership any of us have.
And sorry, I was actually, when I said the city, I actually meant like the APCHA managed rentals.
Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
was from a prior comment that where the city-owned units came up, not rentals, your comment at all.
With that,
I will motion to adjourn.
I will second that.
all right, we got a first
Where's the cake?
motion
Allison?
from John. Allison?
We all gotta do the roll call.
Allison?
Allison, has her hand up.
I agree.
Rachel?
I agree.
Kelly?
Yeah.
John?
Aye.
Carson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Rachel.
Thanks, everybody, I appreciate that.
Hi, y'all.
Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Happy birthday.
Well, Rachel, don't party too hard tonight.
You.
My brother comes in at 9:30 tomorrow. Tonight, I mean, yeah, it is cool.
Birthday.
Sorry, I.